You probably think you heard it all when it comes to sleep. To get better sleep, eat this, drink that, don't drink that, wear this, do that. But you know what's interesting? None of those things actually even come close to the number one thing that helps you get not only quality sleep, but quality alertness throughout the day. And guess what? We get it completely free every single day, and it blows my mind that this research is not more widely shared. What I'm about to tell you, I bet most of you have never heard before, and if you watch till the end of this video, just kidding, sunlight. The answer is getting sunlight. But don't stop watching now, because there is a specific protocol based on science on how to properly do this to actually optimize your sleep and your wakefulness. No, you can't just sunbathe, at least not exactly like this. As usual, I'm going to allow my smarter co-host to explain. So according to Dr. Andrew Huberman, neuroscientist, getting adequate sunlight is the most important thing you can do for yourself when it comes to getting consistent quality sleep. But wait a minute, how is sunlight related to sleep? Good question, my friend. To explain that, let's give you a quick 101 lesson on sleep. There exists in your body a very strong force called the circadian force. Now inside our brain is a clock that determines when we're sleepy and when we're awake. When we wake up in the morning, our adrenal gland releases two chemicals. One is a hormone called cortisol. You might have heard about cortisol in relation to stress. You could get a spike or a pulse of cortisol when you get a stressful text message or when somebody cuts you off in traffic. Well, this type of cortisol release that I'm talking about is actually healthy. It alerts the whole system in our body to increase heart rate, to tense our muscles, and basically tell us it's time to start moving about. So, at least when you first wake up in the morning, it's very important that you have this pulse of cortisol release. And then what also happens is there's sort of a timer in your brain that goes off to eventually secrete a hormone called melatonin, and this happens about 12 to 14 hours after. As I'm sure a lot of you know, melatonin makes you sleepy. So simply put, there are two signals going on here, a wakefulness signal via cortisol and a sleepiness signal via melatonin. And that wakefulness signal is actually what triggers the onset of the sleepiness signal. So that's the gist of the circadian force. Now, if you want to effectively influence the timing of the release of these hormones, it's critically important to get the appropriate amount and the particular quality of light into your eyes. When light comes into your eyes, there's a group of cells, the retinal ganglion cells, that perceives a particular type of light, and they send an electrical signal to a central clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The names are not that important, but it does make me sound smart. Anyway, this fancy nucleus has connections with essentially every cell in your body, and it's responsible for controlling your circadian rhythm. So all of that just means that light actually helps tell your body when it's time to feel awake and alert and when it's time to sleep. Okay, this part is super important. If you don't get your cortisol and melatonin levels or rhythms right, you're susceptible to a tremendous range of bad effects like dementia, negative effects in cardiovascular health, in learning, depression, and so much more. And this is in addition to what I mentioned before about the consequences of poor sleep, like moodiness or lack of focus or motivation. Alright, so now that I've hopefully scared you enough, how do we properly get the right kind of light exposure? To keep things simple, I'm going to break this into two parts. What you should do in the morning and what you should do in the evening. In the morning, go outside and get sunlight into your eyes as close to waking hours as possible. Ideally, you want to do this when the sun rises and it's relatively low in the sky. The angle and the particular contrast between blue and yellow hues trigger activation of the retinal ganglion cells. If you live in an area that doesn't have that much sunlight, go out a little longer. Now, don't directly look at the sun, especially if it's too bright. You don't need to do that. There's enough light dispersed all around you when you're outside. I'm fortunate enough to have large, beautiful windows, and I get tons of sun, but it's actually 50 times less effective to view sunlight through a window. So I still get my butt outside every morning, and at the very least on the balcony. And as Huberman says, if you're trying to eat, it's not like you can just slap a steak onto yourself. You have to consume it through your mouth. So just like that analogy, you have to absorb sunlight through the eyes to activate these cells. And lastly, the other thing to note is when the sun is too high in the sky, the quality of light actually shifts. So try to do this when the sun is relatively low. Wait a minute, what if I'm blind or have really poor vision? Well, the great thing is you don't need to see or perceive the sun in order to activate this circadian mechanism. Alright, so to quickly summarize, here are the key actionable items that you can do during the day. Within a couple hours after waking up, the sooner the better. When the sun isn't too high, go outside for 2 to 10 minutes to get some sun into your eyes. Don't wear sunglasses unless it's for health reasons, and that will help give you a pulse of cortisol that you need to wake up in the morning. And that cortisol pulse sets off a clock for melatonin to be released later. If you absolutely can't go outside, whether it's too cold or you just don't want people to see you first thing in the morning, get a blue light. Contrary to popular belief, blue light is not bad for you. It's actually great for you, and you want a lot of blue and yellow light during the day. So you actually don't want to wear these blue light blockers during that time. And you don't have to buy anything fancy either to get blue light. So those selfie light rings that you see, those are okay too. And although it's not the same, it will still help. That's basically all you need to do during the day. Now let's talk about what you need to do during the evening. Alright, so it's evening. What do you do? Now let me quickly mention sunsets. Just like earlier where viewing a sunrise is great to stay awake, viewing sunlight in the evening within an hour or so of sunset tells your body when it's time to sleep. What's even cooler is that it can also help fight against the negative effects of viewing light later in the day. So let's say if you tend to binge YouTube in the evening, it could help offset some of those negative effects. After 8 p.m. or so, you want to do the complete opposite and make sure you limit your light exposure. And now is actually a great time for those blue light blockers. If you must have lights on, like I do right now with this glaring lamp right here, just make sure it's at least kind of low to the ground. A little life hack though, get some cheap fairy lights and install them under your kitchen counters. Maybe light up some candles or a fireplace. Those sources of lights don't actually really negatively affect your sleep. Overhead fluorescent lights though are the worst to have on in the evening, so limit those. Most important of all for good sleep, do not, and I repeat, do not get light exposure between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. Try to really refrain from looking at your phone or the computer, even if it's on like a tinted night setting. Because light exposure between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. not only affects sleep, but it can suppress dopamine, inhibit learning, and other detrimental effects. Alright, hopefully that bit of information drove home not only how important quality sleep is, but how accessible it actually is. Obviously, I couldn't condense everything from an hour and a half's worth of information to under 10 minutes, so the link's in the description if you want to hear the details on some of the stuff I didn't go over. Thank you everybody for your feedback on the last video, and yes, like button science is a real thing, so make sure you smash that like button. I'm obviously kidding. If you haven't noticed, even though the glasses make me look smart, I'm not a scientist myself, and I'm just an avid neuroscience and self-development nerd who likes to make videos. You guys are awesome for watching till the end, so might as well hit that notification bell, and I will catch you next week.